I am your moderator for this session. My name is Georgia Alexander. I am a librarian at the Alma Jordan Library, the UWI St. Augustine campus. Today's presenter, Professor Maria Frahm-Arp. She is the Executive Director of the Library and Information Center, the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. She has been the Executive Director of the Library and Information Center at the University of Johannesburg since March 2018, UJ as it's fondly called. She has edited 2 books, published 2 monographs, and written over 35 articles and book chapters. She currently serves on a variety of national and international library boards, as well as the Association of Commonwealth Universities Research Support Committee. Professor Frahm-Arp is regularly asked to be a keynote speaker at national and international library conferences and webinars. Her presentation today, entitled People Make the Place, Future-Proofing Support Staff in Higher Education, a UJ Case Study. Professor Maria Frahm-Arp's presentation examines how universities can effectively bring about development, training, and upskilling for support staff within the changing world of contemporary higher education. In a future-oriented higher education ecosystem, university leaders must ensure that all staff are able to continually keep up to date with new technologies and trends in order for support staff to offer the services needed by academics and students. The research for this presentation is based on a 6-year longitudinal case study of the library at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. The research for the paper was drawn from semi-structured, open-ended interviews, minutes of meetings, training and development material, and statistical data of the library's performance between 2018 and 2023. The presentation will outline what interventions the UJ Library put into place to reshape jobs, reskill staff, and strategically plan for the future. It will then examine which interventions worked and which did not, and from these findings offer best practices, recommendations for administrators and leaders in higher ed sector. As this research is based on a university in the global south, the lessons learned are directly applicable to the Caribbean context, where challenges and decolonization, digital transformation, and constrained budgets are often very similar. Professor Frahm-Arp, welcome to ACHEA.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me, and hello to everybody in the room and to those of you that are also online. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person, but excited that with our technologies it's possible to join you virtually. And a big thank you to everybody who's been working behind the scenes to make the technology work. It's not always as easy as it appears. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I think when I put the abstract together, we were working on this research and kind of at the beginning phases of pulling our data together and didn't really realize how much data we had. So I'm going to have to zone in on one particular area which really from our data proves to be the most effective part of our future-proofing positions, and that's really been the experience of task teams which we've had in our library, and I'm going to share that with you today. But before I begin, I just want to give a little bit of context. So the University of Johannesburg is a very large university. It's one of the largest in South Africa. And this is a picture of one of our campuses. We have 4 campuses across Johannesburg, and we have 52,000 students. 32,000 of them are undergraduate students. So we deal with over 10,000 first-year students joining us each year, which you can imagine is quite a huge undertaking. Most of our students come to us with lots and lots of personal abilities, but not having had the world's best education system that they have gone through. we know that 27% of our students have used a library or know what a library is before they've come to the University of Johannesburg. So that's over 70% of our first-year students don't know what a library is. And about 72% of our students have not worked on a computer before coming to the university. So they are tech-savvy in that many of them have smartphones and are able to do things like online banking, but they haven't actually worked with computers. So when we try and do training with them right at the beginning of the year, and we say to them, you know, use your mouse to click on here, they have no idea what we're talking about. Of these students, 86% of them receive government grants. And so that means that they come from families that are basically earning less than $1 a day. And so that gives you some kind of picture of the type of university that we are, and the number of students that we are working with, and something of our context. So I thought it would be a good idea to just start with this image. These are three women, and if I ask you which of these was not generated by AI, I know that in the room many different people are guessing at different images. But when you look at that image, how does it make you feel? If AI can generate art, what do we need people for? If AI is creative and innovative, what jobs will our students be doing? And while some of you might have guessed, all three images were generated by AI. And so that just points to the way that we often ask the wrong kinds of questions, or we are prompted in the wrong way. And so we live in a very different world to what it was a couple of years ago. And within this context, what is the importance of the university, and what is the importance of support staff within the university? So I want to look at some of the external pressures that are on our universities, because I think it plays an incredibly important role when talking about support staff. I don't know what your universities are like, but in our university, as soon as there is financial pressure, the first thing is, how can we get rid of support staff? What are support staff actually doing? How do support staff actually benefit us? And then, of course, we have the internal pressures on support staff. Are they as valuable as the academic staff? That's a question we often hear. And so I'm going to look at those two factors because I think it's very important to sort of highlight this landscape. And then I'm going to say, well, what needs to change? And this comes out of our data. What did we feel was really the most important thing that needed to change given these kinds of pressures? And then I'm going to talk about how do we future-proof the work of librarians, but I think this can be applied across the varying different support sectors within universities. And I'm going to really focus on our task teams as a best practice and some ideas that I hope will be useful for you to take home with you. So, of course, the big pressure on our universities is economic pressures. One of the most important statistics, I think, is that when we look at Britain, the major reduction in funding for the higher education system over the last 10 years has been very real. And it's had a ripple effect across most universities within the Americas, within Africa, and within Europe. Similar trends. And so we are living in a world in which the finances to higher education are currently constrained and will be constrained for the next couple of years. The second pressure point is global politics, particularly the rise of the far right. And I was in a discussion with colleagues that are part of the OCLC leadership group. And one of my colleagues was saying that in the Netherlands, with the rise of the far right, their budgets for libraries have been cut by 24%, as these different political parties don't value education as much as perhaps more liberal parties had done before. And a 27% reduction in anybody's budget is pretty major. Then the third of our pressures are ideological pressures. Do students actually get jobs with their degrees? Do universities actually teach anything that's relevant? The rise of alternatives to universities, particularly places like Google and Amazon, who are starting to have their own degrees, which you can do in-house through varying types of modules. The entry of big business into education. So just as big business changed medicine and the pharmacy world after the Second World War, I think in the age of AI, we are going to see big business enter into the education sector, and quite how that's going to change the sector, we're not quite sure. And then, of course, fourth industrial revolution disruptors to knowledge creation and information sharing. And all of these impact us in universities. And finally, the big question of, well, what is the meaning of a university? So this is a picture of the Bodleian Library at Oxford. And, you know, the big thing used to be that the question was, what are universities and academics good at? But now we're asking, well, what are they actually good for? What is the benefit that a university brings to the social system that we live in? How do we benefit our societies? And so it doesn't matter which part of the support services we're in. We're all working in institutions where our finances are constrained, where ideologies are playing a role, where politics is playing a role, and where the question of what the university is there for is actually an underlying question that many people don't necessarily want to address. But if you're not quite sure what you're there for, it does mean that we start to make some drastic decisions, and we start to say, well, why do we need certain types of people doing certain things within the university? So, what is the problem internally? What are some of the key pressures? Well, I think one of the biggest problems that we have within the higher education sector is this idea that we talk about people who are not academics as support staff. We are support acts. Well, I'm not actually sure that that is so true. So, librarians are not really support staff. In fact, they are professional staff who do a very particular job that enables research and learning. If you work in a research office, you are professional staff who enable the process of research, very often linked to funding, funding proposals, etc. If you are within academic support, helping people to improve their skills as teachers and education facilitators, you're not really a support act. You are central to helping academics become better at facilitating learning. So this is really one of the most important things that came out of our data. When we looked at what people were doing in the library, and we thought about, well, what happened when you took those people out of the university system? It wasn't just a case of supporting things. It was actually that without these librarians, a whole bunch of things would simply not happen. And so I think one of the most important things that we need to do when we're talking about the future of support staff is possibly to really talk about ourselves as professional staff who are all doing something very important within the structure of the university, understanding that the context of universities is changing and the needs of universities are changing, and what universities are meant to do, in other words, their research and how they are really enabling students to become people who are work ready, is all changing. So what needs to change within this system? Well, as I said, I think it's very important that we begin to think of librarians as professional staff, central to and essential for research and education. But the same can be said, as I said, for people working in a research office, etc. If you just look at librarians, our work is about helping people find articles, manage data sets, manage references. These are not things that are an added extra. They are essential to the work of research. In teaching and learning, it is to really teach students to find, analyze, critique, and use information. That is the very basis of being able to get a degree. It's not an add-on, it's not a support, it is an essential thing that people need from a library. And then within this new world of the fourth industrial revolution, libraries are becoming those places that train ethical and effective use of new technologies such as AI, virtual reality, 3D printing. So these are not add-ons, they are not support, they are central to the university and its structures, and if the university is going to move forward. So one of the second really important things that came out of our data was that the library tended to be a space of more innovation than faculties. So within a faculty, we had a department that might take up AI, for example, or an engineering department that might take up 3D printing. But it was only in the library that these kinds of things were being set up in a way that these innovations could be accessible to all students across all the disciplines. And our latest data is showing that actually amongst AI, there is quite a low understanding of generative AI amongst our students, and also quite a low understanding of it amongst our academic staff. And really the role of the library is going to be to try and show people how to use these different technologies. So libraries are not just a support, they are also the game changers. They are the people at the forefront of conversations leading the way. So what else needs to change? Well, we need to, as libraries, for example, bring about technological innovations. Librarians need to lead critical discussions, particularly around these different innovations, but the same would be true of people within the research office. And then libraries, like people within academic development or the research office, really need to become centers of sustainability. How are we places that are environmentally sustainable, financially sustainable, and places that truly engage with the sustainable development goals? Now, as you can see, this is all quite a mouthful. And there is no way that I can unpack these findings within this one presentation. But you can see that for us, the big thing that has come out of our data is this idea of libraries as places of innovation leading the discussions within the institution. And because that is such a challenge, how do we do that? So what needs to change? Well, all of this is really about people learning. And that has been the center of what we have done within the library at the University of Johannesburg. And so we found that as critical as it was that librarians be at the forefront of this change, and it's just as important within academic development, because libraries, the research office, academic development, etc., we are those kinds of places that go across the whole university. We're not just stuck within one faculty. And so we are able to impact change in ways that it's not possible for a faculty to impact across the whole university. But for this to happen, the staff that work within these divisions need to learn and need to constantly be learning. So what can you do to future-proof your libraries? And I just want to share very briefly what we did at the University of Johannesburg Library. So we brought about whole new products that we brought on board. We used Explorer and Summon, and they've been useful for us, but any kind of innovations that you bring about. And I'm not sure why the only pictures I could find was Ex Libris, Explorer and Summon, when I know they've now moved to Clarivat. But then we also set up research data management. We are also working on a sustainable development of our collection, so a sustainable collection development. And this is a very big part of what we are doing in the library. And so there are many different innovations that we can bring about to future-proof ourselves. We've brought about 3D printing. We have a virtual reality lab. We are very involved in generative AI and are in the process of putting together an undergraduate training program on using generative AI and one for postgraduate students. But the big thing that all our innovations and everything that we have done has really led to is a huge increase in our resource usage. So you can see at the bottom of the table from 2019, we had just over 6 million people taking out books or reading journal articles, and we're now over 10 million people. So that's a huge increase. In the number of students that we've trained, we have also seen a huge increase from just over 18,000 students in 2019 to nearly 26,000 students in 2019. So how were we able to do this? And we have done all of this with no extra personnel and with no extra money. And really the big thing that we've done is develop what we call task teams. These are project-based teams in which people really have an opportunity to work as a team and learn new things. Very often also solving a problem that the library has identified. And it's the task teams that I'd like to share with you this afternoon, because they have really been our most important catalyst. When we looked at our data, the thing that kept coming back over and over again was people saying it was in the task team that I learned to do this. It was the task teams that innovated our research data management site. We didn't have one 6 years ago, and it was developed through a task team. Bringing on board Summon and Explorer was done through task teams, for example. These are spaces where people really learn leadership skills, where we really embrace the strategic goals of the university and the library, and we use SMART goals to make sure that we actually achieve what we set out to do. This is how we've been able to bring about a culture of innovation and learning and bring about a culture of staff development. And so I've put this picture up because it really highlights what we think task teams are about. They're spaces where you get your hands dirty and where you take an idea and you enable it to blossom into a plant, and then hopefully that becomes a beautiful flower or a tree or whatever analogy you want to use. So now I want to share a little bit what we actually did, because when you read the literature, there are so many different ways in which people do task teams. And I thought it might be useful to talk about what we did, because this was really the catalyst that enabled us to bring about so much change. So all our staff are involved in task teams. They choose which team they want to be in, and that is voluntary. You don't need to have any knowledge. So for example, if you are an administrative assistant and you are very interested in research data management, you can join the research data management task team. Now, the marvelous thing that has happened is that people have done this. So we now have administrative staff who have a much better understanding of things that go on in the library. We have librarians who understand what is happening within collection development. And so we've really been able to get people to start moving out of their silos and to get a much broader sense of what's going on, to learn new things and new skills, and of course, to make new friendships, have better connections with colleagues they would otherwise never really engage with. The teams are mostly led by people who are not managers. So leading a task team is a very important way in which people learn leadership skills. Each task team has a very clear goal, so you only have to achieve one thing. And if you've achieved that halfway through the year, then your task team stops working for the rest of the year because you've achieved your goal. We use SMART goals to plan and implement the projects. The teams emerge out of our annual strategic planning day, and then each team addresses a particular strategic goal that we have identified. We have a maximum of 10 people in each team, and we have about 16 teams. We have a staff of 138 people. Your task team participation counts 10% of your annual key performance indicator, and your task team leader runs your key performance review. So if you are in an organization that does KPIs or KPAs, and you struggle because actually most of the time staff don't really understand how this works, a fantastic benefit of our task teams has been that we have many more staff members who are not managers, probably will not be managers anytime soon, but have now had to lead KPI conversations, been on the other side, and realize that this is not about whom you favor, it's about what work people have actually done. And so our tensions around KPIs have gone down quite dramatically over the years. But the big point about task teams is staff development and learning. Implementing new innovations, developing leaders, and really getting the staff to participate. So people choose which team they join, but people also choose and decide on the teams we're going to have for that year. And that comes out of our strategic planning day. So people are deeply invested in the strategy of the library. They have chosen in which direction we should be going and what they are going to contribute to that direction. And so people feel as though they are part of the process, and they feel as though things are not being done for them, but that they are making decisions. Our task team are overseen by our Director for Education and Research, and I think this is very, very important, that a senior person oversees the teams and gives direction. They report back to all sorts of different forums within the process of the year, and then very importantly, I spend a lot of time working with the task team leaders every year, running a variety of different workshops, which I've listed here, that really help people to develop as leaders. It is in this that we really get some of the most important feedback, because people who've been task team leaders have tended to be the people that have really got a lot out of the process, have learnt a lot, and many of, not all, but many of those people have actually gone on to be promoted within the library system. Just some of the task teams that we've put together. So within research engagement, we have developed a research data management task team, and they've actually implemented our research data management system, etc. And that has then led to 2 new positions. They were created out of positions that came available when people retired. We've developed something called the Research Navigator, which is an online it's like a LibGuide that people can go into, and it really helps you through the whole master's or PhD process. We've had an ORCID's ID task team. Within the teaching and learning space, we've had several task teams looking at our LibGuides, task teams teaching people to understand pedagogy, teaching librarians to become better teachers, making 2-minute videos, learning how to teach in the online space. We've done several things around community development, and then lots of task teams around innovations. Probably the most popular one has been our PC support. So we have a task team every year, which anybody can join, and it really teaches you basically how to manage your computer and troubleshoot for basic problems. It's possibly the most popular of our task teams, and it has really led to lots and lots of people kind of understanding the basics of how to work their computer and not have to phone IT every time something small has gone wrong. We've developed our own chatbot, we've developed a makerspace, we've developed a virtual reality lab, and all of this has come through our task teams. So practically, if you wanted to do something like this within your space, of course, the first question is, what is the problem? And this is really one of the things that I think is most important. What is the problem, and how can you break that problem down into one thing? What is the one thing that you want to do to solve this problem, which might be very complex? Who is going to be involved, and what are they going to do? So if an admin person joins a makerspace task team and knows absolutely nothing about computers, they can take the minutes of all the meetings. They can set up the meetings the task team is going to have. They can help procurement and the buying of things. Everybody has a skill. Everybody has something to offer. The key is to identify people's skills and how they can be used for that year in that team. And then, of course, what are the tools that you need to solve the problem? You might, as a team, need to learn a whole lot of things before you can begin to do anything. So we have 2 task teams working on different aspects of generative AI, and they're not really going to make anything at the moment. The big point of these task teams is for people to learn about generative AI, because we need that first before we can actually engage meaningfully with the rest of the university. And so these would be the kind of key things that I would suggest that you look at. Within all our staff, we have always got amazing people who come with lots of hidden talents and abilities. And very often when we are confined to one lane and that's all we do, we don't really allow people the opportunity to share with us everything that they can do. And that's one of the exciting things about task teams. So how did we develop our understanding and knowledge of all sorts of different things through the task teams? Often it was through publishers and vendors offering training on different things, coming to a better understanding of our clients' needs, doing lots of research to understand our students, understanding what different platforms do, different types of technologies do, what just sounds, exciting, and what is really useful in our context. So one of our big things is virtual reality, but we want virtual reality that is decolonized. We don't want the virtual reality space to now become another space in which we're basically colonized again, told to think in a particular way. How you deal with an accident site in the South African context, particularly a rural context, is quite different to how you would deal with an accident site if you were teaching emergency medicine within an American context. In the South African context, you may very well have somebody come along and start saying, the ancestors have done something, that's why there was this accident. And you need to know how to manage that. But virtual reality that comes nicely packaged from North America is not going to tell you anything about that. So we also want to critically engage with these tools. For us, the big thing has been creating bite-sized training sessions, having bite-sized projects that a team does, and creating spaces where people can play, try things out. If it fails, it's okay. It's just a task team. And we have several task teams that really never quite made it. They didn't really achieve very much. And that's okay. The next year, people go on to a different task team and they learn something new and they learn from their failures. So for us, the big thing has been allow people to fail fast and fail forward in order to create a culture of change. Allow people to explore to do what they find interesting, to do what they feel they're good at, and allow them to change direction. These have probably been the most important things that people have reported back from the interviews that we have done and that they have appreciated about the task teams. Of course, they have found the task teams challenging. It took about 3 years before people really settled down to the idea that 10% of your time should be spent on your task team, because initially people said, oh, I don't have time for this, I can't do it. No, 10% of your time, 10% of your KPI is dedicated to this. You know, you can find the time. And so in all of that, we were able to move our library into a different direction. And as I said when I started, I think that in our professional divisions, where we are professional staff offering essential services to the university community, we really need to take this seriously. We are not just support, we are essential professionals who have an important role to play, very often in driving actually things forward within our entire institutions. And that is pretty overwhelming. So the way that we've done it has been primarily through task teams. And our research shows that for our staff, this has been particularly useful and has taken big concepts, big ideas about change, and brought them into manageable chunks in which they've been able to learn the things they are interested in and develop as people. Thank you all so much for your attention, and I hope there is time for some questions.
Thank you, Professor Frahm-Arp, for a very engaging and enlightening presentation. There were so many takeaways that I made some quick notes, the use of data from collecting data, how you all reimagine jobs of support staff, librarians as professionals, supporting other professionals, very important, best practices, creation of task teams, and giving an appreciation for what each colleague does, and people learning new skill sets, inclusion, feedback, libraries as places of innovation and creativity. There was so much, libraries leading the way. So just to wrap up, I'd like to take a few questions from the audience. I'm sure you all have some questions. Okay. Go ahead. Some mic. Just let the audience know what institution you're from.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Stephanie from the University of Maryland. And I was curious, I really like this idea of allowing the task teams to fail. And I was wondering, how do you manage that with the, from what I understand about KPI, it sounds like that might be like some sort of employee evaluation. And so how do you evaluate someone in an environment where they are allowed to fail? Can you talk a little bit more about that philosophy you use in your KPI?
Great. So the idea is that we're really focused on people trying things rather than always succeeding. So if you didn't try something, that would be a negative. But if you tried, so let's take an example. We have been working on designing an online game for plagiarism, to teach students about plagiarism. We've been able to design something, and we now have something, that's quite exciting, and students like using it. But in the first year, people really had to learn a lot about gaming, a little bit about coding. And so what they thought was going to go quite easily actually didn't. And so in many ways, the team really failed in the first year because they didn't actually produce anything. So, that's your criteria of success. But they learned an enormous amount. And in the following year, we had the building blocks in place for the team then to be a lot more successful. So failure is seen as fine so long as you've tried something and can explain why it then failed. I hope that goes some way to answering the question. Great question, thank you.
Any more questions?
Check. Thomas Edward, University of the West Indies, Keville. My question to you is, how do you get the broader university environment to recognize you as a professional and not as support staff?
By the impact that you have. So one of the big things is when I joined the library was seen very much as a support. But as, for example, we have set up research data management, we offer very professional training on how to use referencing. Those are just two examples. The academic staff have begun to see us as really essential and professional. And that's one of the key reasons why our training numbers have gone up so much, because academics are pushing students to come to the library. We are not a library where students have to come to any of our trainings. It's not mandatory. There are no modules that they have to do as first-year students that are compulsory. So this is all people who volunteer to come to our training. And if you consider that 52,000 people are students at UJ, and we train nearly 26,000 people, half the students at UJ will choose to come to our trainings. But it is because of the quality of what we're doing, and we've only been able to improve the quality by improving the understanding of librarians and how to be better teachers, how to be better trainers, develop their own understanding of the products that we are training students on. And so the shift has come in the value that we are adding to our academic institution. But a lot of it has been about us pushing forward and recognizing what we need to do and marketing our services and ensuring that they are of a very good quality.
Yes, good afternoon, Professor. Yes, good afternoon, Professor. My name is Dr. Sean McKay from Turks and Caicos Islands Community College. And you mentioned the word key performance indicators, and you mentioned that it took you 6 years to move the institution towards positive outcomes, right? So instead of reflecting on the first year as not achieving your outcomes, because you want to motivate the team to look at things positively and to keep going towards the goals. What strategies did you use to keep moving the team positively forward even after the first year? Because between year 1 and 3, there would need to be some adaptations. So what did you do to move the teams positively between years 1 and 3 to get the key performance indicators achieved?
Okay, so sorry, just for clarity. So very often people were achieving their key performance indicators from the get-go. What I meant was that in the first 3 years, people didn't take the task teams that seriously. And then they realized that actually these are serious. They form 10% of your key performance indicator. So, but the overall question about how do you keep going when things are not that successful? A big part of it has been how much myself and one of my directors work very closely with task team leaders. So between us, we probably meet with the task team leader once every 3 weeks for some kind of workshop or feedback session. that enables us to constantly check in. Is the team working? Are they, coming together? Or do we need to help the leader to bring their team together better? Secondly, is the goal, the thing that the team wants to do, actually doable in a year? Very often we find ourselves reining people in and saying, no, just focus on this. And that helps a lot to keep people motivated because it's not too much that's being asked and it's bite-sized and it's manageable. Then we also do quite a lot of work with the task team leaders, helping them to, encourage reluctant participants. And a lot of that is about people having come to a place where over time they really realize are going to be left behind. But that has been all about generally developing a culture of learning rather than a culture of being fearful and just wanting to stay in what you're comfortable with. And the task teams that are sort of safe spaces where you can try things out have been quite essential for that. And then, of course, the thing that keeps people going is, while not all task teams are successful, every year the teams are successful. Many of the teams are successful. And we see how, as a whole team, the library are bringing about changes. We went from not having a makerspace to having a makerspace, just as an example. And that sort of thing is very encouraging for everybody within the library.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all we have time for today. Professor Frahm-Arp, thank you so much for your very relevant and engaging presentation, and thank you for your first attendance at ACHEA. We hope you'll join us again next time. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, very engaged, and this brings us to the end of this presentation.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.